Hello, everyone. Today's masterclass will be on the concepts of OOPS in Java. All right, let's get into it then. Now, what do you think OOPS means? So, OOPS, or we can say OOP, is said to be object oriented programming. And in particular, we're going to be discussing about OOPS or OOP in Java. All right. Now let's compare OOP with another form of programming which is known as procedural programming. Now procedural programming, let's denote it as PP and OOP. Now procedural programming is about writing procedures or methods that perform operations on the data. Whereas in object-oriented programming, it's about creating objects that contain both data and its methods. Now let's look at some advantages of object-oriented programming. Now many of you may be wondering that why don't we just simply use our normal procedural programming, and why do we use object-oriented programming? So object-oriented programming is much faster and easier to execute. The next point would be that OOP provides a clear structure for the programs to run. So whatever program we're writing in this language, it provides a clearer structure for it to run smoothly, which is much faster and the execution being much easier when compared to that of simple procedural programming. Now, OOP helps to keep the Java code dry. And let's look at this concept. Don't repeat yourself. Now, it makes the code easier to maintain and debug. Now, what does this mean? It makes the code easier to maintain and debug. Let's say we're writing a code in an object-oriented programming language. Let's take the example of Java, for instance. Now, whenever we have to debug or we have to make the code run flawlessly without any bugs present, we take the help of object-oriented programming, which is Java. It helps the code to execute easier, and it helps to maintain as well as debug the similar code so that we can get our desired output much faster. All right. And with OOP, it makes us be able to create full reusable application. Now, what do you mean by full reusable application? Let's say we're creating an app. You must have seen that many app developers or basic developers use programming languages such as Java, C++, and Python in creating their apps, so that you can debug the code very easily. It helps us to create the application and multiple applications for that, in fact. And it also helps to create applications with writing less amount of code as compared to, let me just write, less amount of code as compared to procedural programming languages. All right. So let's discuss our first concept in Java OOPS. What are classes and objects. So we know that Java is associated with classes and objects along with its attributes, or you can say everything in Java is associated with classes and objects along with its attributes. Let's take an example. In real life, a car is an object. The car has attributes such as weight and color. The car must be weighing differently and must be of different colors, which describes that this is a particular car, which identifies the car basically. And methods such as drive and brake, what you can do with the car. And a class is like an object constructor or a blueprint of the car for creating objects. Now, let's create a class in Java. So you open any compiler. I'll be opening this compiler known as Programmers. It's an online Java compiler. So we can simply, you can see the class is by default created main. Now, how do I create this class? We simply write public class main. So this main is basically defining the name of the class. And let's add an object int x equal to 5. We've created a class main with the variable x inside it. All right. Now, let's create an object. So in Java, an object is created from a class. In this case, our class is main. All right. We've already created the class named main. So now we can use this to create objects. So now to create an object in the class main, we need to specify the class name followed by the object name and use the keyword new as in new. All right, let's take another example. We have to create an object called myObj and we have to print the value of x. All right, so let's continue with our code over here. All right. So as you can see, we've gotten our output, which is 5. Now, you can say our object was over here, int x should be equal to 5. So we've used this basic syntax, public static void main, string argument, and in the next line, we use main my object. So what we've done is we've created an object called my obj, which is present over here, and we've printed it along with the value of x. So my obj dot x. So here we can see that we get our desired output, which is x. So this is how we create a single object. Now let's look into creating multiple objects. Let's say we're creating 2 objects of the class main. All right, how would we do that? We'll just look into that. All right. So the code till here will remain the same. Let's take main my obj 1 and let's take this to be our first object. Now this over here, I've added a comment which makes us easier to identify what type of code this line represents. So this is our first object, my obj1. We'll do the same thing for my obj2 as well, which would be our second object. Now, look over here that when we are only printing a single object, we write a single thing system.out.print the myobj.x. Now, since we have to print multiple objects, so instead of just one line, we're going to be having to print two lines. So system.out.println myobj1 as well as system.out.print myobj2. Let's see if we get our desired output or not. See, so this is how we print multiple objects. Okay. So now we're going to be using multiple classes. So you can also create an object of a class and access it in another class. This is often used for better organization of classes. Now, what does that mean? It means that one class has all the attributes and methods, while the other class holds the main method. All right. Also remember that the name of the Java file should match the class name. In this, let's take an example. Let's say we create two files in the same directory. Now I'm using an online compiler, but I'll just show you how we can do that. All right. So simply we've created our first class. In the first example, this is our first class, right? Let's take another example. Let's create a second class. Let's name it second. Right? So this is our first class, and you can see over here that we've created a second class. All right. So like it shows error because it's an online compiler, but we can, when we're using an like a compiler such as VS Code, we can create multiple classes with the same method that I've just showed you. All right. So now let's move on to attributes. Now, since we've understood what are objects and classes, let's move on to attributes. So we use the term variable for x, right? You can see that x was equal to 5, and that x is our variable. So it is actually, x can be called an attribute of the class, or you can say that class attributes are variables within a class. So let's take an example. We used int x in our previous example when we were creating this class. Now we're taking multiple variables. Let's say, let's call it 3. Right? Now, this x and y that I've written over here, this can be called as an attribute of the class. And another definition is that you can say that the class attributes are the variables within which are present within a class. All right. On to the next thing. Now, let's talk about accessing these attributes. So we can access attributes by creating an object of the class and by using the dot syntax. Now you'll understand this line once I'll take the example. Let me just complete this. So I'll just take an example. So we will create an object of the main class with the name myobj like we did in the previous thing. We use the x attribute on the object to print its value. All right, it's quite similar to the thing that we did in the previous example as well. Let me just repeat it so that you can get a better understanding of how to access attributes. So let's say we've created int x equal to 5. Now let's write the basic syntax: public static void name. So we've created an object called myobj and printed the value of x. So this is how we access these attributes. Basically, accessing means printing the value. So like we did, we accessed two attributes in the previous example by taking myobj1 and myobj2, right? So we can print multiple values of the same attribute by using declaring them are different variables. All right. So let's moving on to modifying these attributes. Now what I want is, let's say I don't define the value of this attribute. Let's say I just write it as int x. So the rest of the code stays same. Now I want the output to come as 40. The value of x should be at 40. So what should I do? We've declared public static void main my object equal to new main. All right. On the next line, we'll declare the value of my obj dot x. We're printing my obj dot x, so we'll declare the value in this line. So let's say we're taking the value as 40. All right. So without declaring the attribute beforehand, we can do this method and do it after that as well. So using this, we can modify the attributes values, or we can say we can override existing values of the attribute as well. So now let's take an example that x is still 10 or 5, you can say. And I want to override the existing values. I want to change the value of x to, let's say, 25. Will this works? Whenever we're looking at a line of code, we go from top to bottom. All right. So we've declared our class, we've declared our app attribute, and our main my object is equal to new main. So over here till here, our value should be printed as 5. But in the next line, you can see that we've declared the value of my obj.x to be 25. So the value is now changed to 25. All right. So using this method, we can change the values or we can override existing values as well. And if you don't want the ability to override existing values, so we declare the final attribute this attribute as final. So we'll just write the final keyword. Now, even though I wrote my obj over here as 25, it will still print the value as, it should print the value as 5. Just a second. Let me just check. Yeah. So once we've declared it as final, it will generate an error. Right over here will generate an error. So why does it generate an error? The value of int x is 5 and that is final. We cannot change the value. So once we've written my obj.x equal to 25, the code will not run. You can see over here in error it says my obj.x is equal to 25, one error. All right. So using the final keyword, we can declare the attribute as final. Now, let's look at multiple objects yet again. So if we create multiple objects of one class, you can change the attributes within the values in one sub object without affecting the attribute values in the other. Let's take an example. Let's change the value of x to 25 and take another object my obj2 and leave x in my obj1 unchanged. We remove the final keyword because we don't want it to be final in this example. Now let's run the code. Now, why do you think it will generate an error? Because we've created two objects, my obj1 and my obj2, right? But over here, we have to declare the value of the object as well. So let's take my obj2 to be 25. If I hadn't declared the value of my obj2 as 25, it wouldn't have been printed. All right. So let's just try it out one more time. You can check that my obj1 is declared as 5, like we did in the attribute int x equal to 5, and my obj2 is now 25. It will not generate an error. Not generate an error because we aren't using the final keyword. Now, now we've taken multiple objects. Let's take multiple attributes. So you can specify as many attributes as you want. All right. Now let's take some examples of strings. Say f name equal to Rahul. Right? And string L name equal to Sharma. Let's take an example. And age. Right. So we print the basic syntax. Remember that Java is case sensitive, so be very careful of the names that you write. I'm basically concatenating so that we get a single output as name equal to the first name with along with the last name. All right, let me just write a space in between. Now we also wanted to print the age as well, so we'll write system dot out dot print ln bracket will write age. Now always enclose your strings within double quotes because without that it won't be printed. Plus, what do you think would be my obj dot? Hence, I want to print the age, so it would be my obj dot age. Over here, it would be the object name. Over here, it would be the attribute or the variable. All right, and yeah, let's see if we get an output or do we get an error. So we're getting an error, and let's see why. System.out.println. Like I told you before, that Java is case sensitive. So as you can see over here that the S was small, so it didn't print. Always be careful when you're writing this. All right. So you can see over here that name has been printed by Rahul space Sharma. Now let me remove some spaces. If I don't do the space, and let's see what our name would be. It would be Rahul Sharma without any space. and age 24. All right. So this is how we can specify multiple attributes and print them. Now, let's look at some Java class methods. Now, we can say that the methods are declared within the class and they are used to perform certain actions. Now, what are those actions? Let's create a method name, my method, in the main class. All right. Let's just remove all of this and bracket as well. So we use the my method to create new methods in Java. All right. Let's print hello world. All right, it's taking some time, but basically it prints a text when it is called. So like when we call a method, it basically prints the text. Let's say hello world for this example. Let me just refresh it so that you can get a better understanding of it. For some reason it isn't printing. All right, no worries. So the what my method does, it prints a text or you can say the action when it is called. To call a method, we write the method's name followed by two parentheses, which we can see over here, and a semicolon. All right. So let's take another example. Inside main, we'll call my method yet once again. Uh, let's just look into the code once again. All right. So over here, we've declared public class main static void my method. So over here, you can see that we basically declared a method inside the class main. Now, I don't know, for some reason it's giving an error. Maybe it's a compiler problem. But in other cases, it would simply print our hello world in the output box. All right. So let's just leave it to that. And so this is how we declare more methods. Now you've seen that I'm using very static and public keywords over here, right? Let's differentiate between them. All right. So now what I want you to do, to whoever's listening to this, I want you to open a compiler, any compiler, and I'm going to give you some notes regarding this and I want you to run it and I'll just tell you the code as well as the output. All right. Let's go back and yeah. So let's discuss about static versus public. So that's right. Static versus public. Now, we often see that the Java programs that we write often have static and public keywords, or we can call them as attributes, static and public attributes. Now, all of the programs that I've written till now have both these keywords, right? So in the above example, you can see as well that, like the example that we just did, that we created a static method. Now, what does a static method means? It means that it can be accessed it can be accessed without creating an object of the class. And this is what static does. Now the public method which we use can only be accessed by objects. Now let's take an example to demonstrate the differences between static and public methods. So now I'll write a code over here. So this is our code. All right. So we declare a public class main. So let's say public class main. We open the bracket. Now let's use the static method first. We create a comment, static method. You can create a comment. I'm just doing this for your reference. Whenever I'm writing this, it simply creates a comment. So static dot void my static method, and we write the open and close bracket. Now again, system dot out dot print ln. Let's say we can write static methods can be called without creating objects. Close the bracket. Now we close this. Now let's declare a public method as well. Public method. So public void my public method we start the bracket, curly bracket, system dot out dot println. Let's write in the bracket that public methods must be called by creating objects. This was the main difference between these two, that the static does not require the creation of objects, whereas the public method does. And we'll just close the bracket, and then we're going to be writing the main method as well. Main method. So now whoever's listening to this, I want you to write the code that I'm writing in this notes side by side on your compiler so that you can physically or practical see the difference between all these methods. Now we'll write a basic string, square brackets, open close, args, and we open the curly bracket. My static method. So over here, what we're doing is we're calling the static method. Yet again, don't be confused. This is the comment. I'm just doing this for your reference. And in this, the my public method can be called. This would compile an error if we use the my public method in this situation over here. This is yet another comment for your reference. So if we use this method over here, my public method, in this code, instead of static method, this will compile us an error. Compile us an error. All right. Now let's just create our objects, main, my obj equal to new main. So we've created an object in this code, and then we write my dot obj dot my public method. So in this line of code, we've created an object of the main class, and in the last line, we've called the public method on the object. And let's just close the code, right? Now this is the end of our code. This is our whole code. The public class main, we've declared the static method first, static dot void my static method, and we system dot out dot println. That static method can be called without creating objects. And the next thing that we've done is we've declared a public method. So we use the syntax public void my public method and open close bracket and curly bracket. And in the next line, we print that public methods must be called by creating objects. And the last thing, we'll use the main method. So public static void main string args that we do in every code that we write. So after that, we use the my static method. It calls the static method, but always remember we have to use the static method in this case. If we use the public method that which we normally do over here, this will compile us an error. Then basically we create an object main my obj equal to new main and my obj dot my public method, and then we close the code. Now I'm pretty sure that all of you have written this in your compiler, and if not, I want you to rewind and just write the whole code. Now, what do you think the object would be? The object would have satisfied our difference that we were trying to create between both the methods. So our first output would be that static methods can be called without an object. And then our next output would be that public methods must be called by creating an object. Basically, whatever we're writing in the system.out.print, it satisfied our whole methods. So whatever you're writing, that would be printed as the output. Like public method must be called by creating objects. So these would be our two outputs that we would be getting when we're creating this whole code. All right. I'm pretty sure we've understood the basic difference between static methods and public methods. Now, let's look into accessing methods without an object. So, access methods. Before without, let's say we will access methods with an object. Let's learn that with an object. All right. So, to understand that, let's take an example. Let's create an car object named car object. This is our aim, to create a car object named, let's say, my car, my CR. So we call certain attributes such as call, full throttle. This is one of our attributes that we'll be calling throttle, and speed. So let's declare both of these as methods on the my car object. So this is our aim. All right. So at first we'll create, let me just code. Let's look into the code now. Firstly, we'll create a main class. Public class main. Now, the second step would be to create a full throttle method. This would be our second step. So we've created our main class. Now let's create a method. So public void full throttle. Full throttle. So system, we created our method. Now let's print it out. System.out.println the car is going as fast as it could. I want to print this. Right? Now this, we've created our full throttle method. Now the next step would be, remember these are comments. Don't mistake them for the lines of code, because that would make the code full of errors. These are comments which do not affect the code. They are just for your referencing so that you can understand the code properly. So now we're going to be creating a speed method. Speed method. And let's add a parameter to it, and add a parameter. So like we did over here, we'll do the same. Public void speed int max speed. Let's start the bracket. System dot out dot println max speed is plus max speed. So over here we created a string, and so that we can display the max speed as along with it. So whenever we're getting our output, it would say max speed is and the max speed of the car. All right. All right. We've done. We've created a speed method. We've created a full throttle method. Now inside main, let's call the methods on the mycar object which we've created. So let's not write comments for this. Let's just go to the code. So public static void main. The basic syntax that we write: string bracket args, close it, and then start with the curly bracket. Main my car. Now this is our object. My car is our object. That is our objective. But we have to create the my car object. New main, and main is our class. Now we define the my car object to the attributes mycar dot full throttle and my car dot speed. Let's say the max speed of the car is 200. So we called the full throttle method in this line of code, and in the second line of code, my car dot speed, we've called the speed method. Calling means basically accessing, which means so that we can print these values. Now let's look at the code yet again. So we've created a main class, public class main, and we've created a full throttle method, public void full throttle. We've printed the things, the car is going as fast as it can. And in the next thing, we've created a speed method and added a parameter to it. So public void speed is int max speed. So this, we've used this so that we can print the string along with the max speed. All right. And then we've basically created an object and all. Now, what do you think the output would be? Take 2 minutes and think the output. Does this satisfy our condition? Have we created the car object my car? Yes. We've called the full throttle and speed methods. So what do you think the output would be? Take 1 minute to this. All right. So I'm pretty sure that you've already guessed what the output would be since we've already defined it. The output would be the car is going as fast as it can. This would be our first output. And the max speed is 200. All right. So what we've done, let me just explain it to you. Let's We've created a custom main class, and we use the class keyword. All right. We created full throttle and speed. These are both methods of the main class. This class, these two are the methods of it. The full throttle method and the speed method will print out some text when they are called. In the last these lines of code, we're calling both the full throttle method and the speed method. All right. The speed method accepts an int parameter called max speed. All right. So like I declared over here, int max speed, so that 200 might be printed along with the string. So like I said, we declared a parameter along with the speed method. That's what we've done over here. Then we go to the main method, which the main method is basically a built-in Java method that runs our program. All right. And after that, we use the new keyword and we created an object with the name my car. Then after we've created this, we've called the full throttle and the speed methods on the my car object, and we've run the program using the name of the object my car. And we followed it by a dot like my car dot speed. All right. And this is our whole program that we've discussed. Now, we've already discussed about classes, objects, attributes, and methods. All right. So that'll be all from this masterclass. I hope you enjoyed it and you've learned something new along with it. All right. So thank you very much for joining and hope to see you in the next one. All right.